Black Gemara. This is Simchas Torah's Daf is Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph. We start from the bottom of the page. Tana Rabban. Our Rabban learned. Ein loichim behema. You do not buy an animal. The mois ma'aser sheni. If you're outside of Yerushalayim and you take your money, you bring it to Yerushalayim, and what do you do once you're in Yerushalayim? You buy food and you need animals, bring kabbanas, but not if the animal's outside of Yerushalayim. Why? Either because the animal might get weaker from this long trip, and who said how healthy the animal will be by the time you get there? It's a tircha. Or because it says you should bring money with you to Yerushalayim, either the original crop, whatever it is, or bring the tzarta kesef, you bring money, and that's not money. Says the Gemara, but the im lokach. Let's say you did. You bought an animal outside of Yerushalayim. This shaygig, you did not realize that the money that you're using to buy the animal is actually what do you call it? Is ma'aser money. Is yachzru damim l'mekayma. What happens is we force the seller, once we find out that this money is actually ma'aser sheni money, and so if it's ma'aser sheni money, maybe the animal that you now bought, the animal now becomes ma'aser sheni, and that means you got to bring it with you to Yerushalayim, and you might not. All kinds of trouble can happen. So we tell the seller, undo this deal, give this person back the money. So the money is the ma'aser sheni, the kedusha, and the animal remains chulin. And because it's a mekach taz, the whole thing, right? Because if he would have known that this is ma'aser sheni, he would never have done it. I mean, because the animal now is holy, he has to schlep it all the way to the Shalayim. He'd rather bring money with him to the Shalayim, buy animals there on the spot. Okay, but what happened to Mezid? He knew it was ma'aser sheni money, and he was happy. He wanted to buy an animal with it. Then Tala, he has to bring it to the Shalayim, but Teichel Malkum eat it in the special place, which is Yerushalayim. When do we say this mazit that you have that there's a good transfer, and then now the money is no longer holy and the animal is holy, you bring the animal to Shalayim, the miskaven the lokach chilul shlamim. That was your intention. You knew that the money was ma'aser sheni money. You decided to buy the animal here. Maybe it's a lot cheaper. Once you get to the Shalayim, there's a big demand. It's so much more expensive. So you bought the animal here, but your intention is to bring it with you to the Shalayim, to bring it as a carbon. And therefore, that's perfectly all right. If you did it, and the animal becomes holy, and bring that with you to the Shalayim. But if, let's say, you bought the animal, you had no intention to bring it to the Shalayim. You wanted to use it like your own animal. No, you're not going to treat it as if it's ma'aser sheni. Then Bain Shoigig, Bain Mazid, whether you did it by mistake. We're talking about within Mazid itself. We're talking about that you took the money and you intended to use the animal here, and you intended that the ma'aser sheni should buy with an animal, and this animal should now become, you don't care if it's ma'aser sheni or not. The din then is yachzu damil mekayma. You have to bring the money back. Shagi, because you didn't know, so the whole thing's a mistake. But amazing is we penalize, this is how Rashi learns, because other Shem exactly happen. We penalize the moichid. We penalize the seller. You enabled this person, you know that this person knew it was ma'aser sheni money, bought the animal, so the animal now becomes holy, and he intended to eat it right here and then. So you were complicit in this avera, you the seller. Like you're the fencer, when it comes to stealing. Therefore, we're going to penalize the seller, give that person back the money. So Rashi learns that the animal actually becomes constant. The money becomes deconsecrated. The animal becomes consecrated, and therefore, therefore, we penalize the seller for enabling this to happen. Other Rishonim learn that no, the animal does not become consecrated at all, because you did b'mezid here and had no intention of bringing it to Shalayim. The animal remains chulin, and the money remains holy, but we still penalize the buyer for what he did, and therefore we say take the money back. Taking more further, so what are you telling me? That if you did it deliberately, knowing it's ma'aser sheni money outside of Yerushalayim, the whole thing unravels, right? So how does our Mishnah say that the same Rabbi Yehuda says that you gave ma'aser sheni to a woman, she's mekudesh? If he did it b'mezid. We learn clearly in our Mishnah, okay, b'sheiking out, because had she known ma'aser sheni, she'd be unhappy to travel all the way to the Shalayim. But if did it b'mezid knowingly, then she's mekudesh. But you just said a minute ago that we penalize the seller to undo the whole deal. It's not a deal. But if you don't b'mezid kiddush, we say if he did it deliberately, we penalize the person for using Ma'aser Sheni money to swap it for something else, and therefore how can you give it to her as Kiddushin? So we penalize you. You got to take the money back. As the Gemara, Amar Abulazar says, I'll tell you very simply, because this woman knows the money is Ma'aser Sheni money, and she's happy to take that money and bring it, because money is much easier. She's happy to bring it to Yerushalayim. So there's no reason to penalize anybody here. In the previous case, you penalize because you're keeping the animal here outside Yerushalayim. You plan to eat it here. So therefore, we penalize you because it's a holy animal and you're going to use it as if it's not. But in the case of the Kedusha of the woman, she accepts the money, the Ma'aser Sheni, and she plans to go to Shalayim. She knows that it won't be, that she knows that the animal that won't work, that it won't be, what do you call it, mischal through here, and therefore she knows that this is Ma'aser Sheni money, and because she knows it's Ma'aser Sheni money, she will go and take it to the Shalayim. He'll take it to Shalayim. Says the Gemara. But she knows the money remains holy, and therefore she'll take the money with her to Yerushalayim. Mask Rabbi Yirmiyah, what are you talking about? It says somewhere else that a behemoth, a non-kosher animal, or avodim servants, or kakois and property. The Adam, everyone knows that you can only buy with money things that are edible, that are food, and that's edible. But you're going to buy something which a behemoth which cannot be brought up not edible, or you're going to buy avodim, which is not food, or kakoy. You invest in land in Yerushalayim, but you can't use Ma'aser Sheni money for that. So he says over here, Adam, everyone knows that you cannot use Ma'aser Sheni money and buy those things, right? Everyone knows that. And yet, now we learned, you do not buy a non-kosher animal or avodim, even in Yerushalayim. You cannot now. If you use that money to buy a non-kosher animal, the money remains holy. If you use Ma'aser Sheni money and you try to trade it in for an animal, if it's not kosher, no, the money remains holy. So everyone knows that. And everyone knows that. So look at it. What are you worried about? Why are you penalizing? This guy is in Yerushalayim. He'll do the right thing with the money. He knows that it's holy. And then it says, if he decided to use the money for that anyway, is yoichel kenegda. So what happens is that the seller who has the money right now, truth be told, the money is still holy because it didn't work in this swap money for the animal because the animal is not kosher. So the money is still holy. So we tell the buyer, we're going to penalize the buyer. And we say to the buyer that you now have to spend an equal amount of money and say that the money right now, wherever the seller is, wherever that money is, I know it's holy money and I did the wrong thing. That kedusha of that money should transfer to the money I have here in my hand, and I'm going to bring that to the shalayim. So we see clearly from here that we don't automatically assume because they know that it's Ma'aser Sheni money and that but they're holding on to Ma'aser Sheni, they're going to go do the right thing, go to Shalayim. So we're answering you right. We're talking about a woman who's a Talmud Chacham. I'm not talking about somebody else shlach. We're talking about a Talmud Chacham. Therefore, when she has Ma'aser Sheni money in her hand, she'll do the right thing. Trace already asks, how can the buyer take money from his pocket and say that the kedusha of the money that's sitting by the seller should transfer to this money here? The buyer has no control of that money. It's not in his domain, not in his reshus. How in the world can he have the ability to remove the kedusha of that money to the money in his pocket? So Teisha said generally it doesn't work, especially we learned before. Rabbi Yechon says if somebody steals, neither of them can make a kodesh. But over here, because I'm helping that person out, I'm actually acting as the benefits of this person shouldn't be doing an avera because that person has money. He might think it's not Ma'aser Sheni money, but really it is, and therefore it's very limited what he can do with that money. So therefore you're helping him out. That's why you can do it. Says him further. Okay, we digress a minute. You said so. What do we do in this case? We tell the buyer we don't undo the deal. We say to the buyer, take the money, and you have to now transfer the kedusha of the money to the seller and move it to this money here. We want to know why it's a different outcome here. But why? Let's just say it. Let's unravel the deal and say to the seller, give the money back to the buyer. We say to the buyer, give the non-kosher animal back to the seller, and end the story. Why here we have a different formula? Says the Gemara. So why not? Why don't we just undo the deal and give the money back, like we said over there? Amar Shmuel says, we're talking about a unique case here. Kishabarach, the seller fled, we can't find him. Says the Gemara, so what are you telling me? The time of the barach, only because the seller fled, we cannot find him. We can't say, let's undo the deal because there's no one to talk to. So therefore we say to the buyer, in that case, you take money and you make it kodesh. So the halai barach, if the seller would not have sold, then what would we have done? Then kansin l'maycha. What we would have done is we would have told the seller that you have to undo the whole deal, even though you have the money, you got to give it back to the buyer. We penalize the seller. So the question is, why are we penalizing the seller? Let's penalize the buyer. Let's penalize the buyer. And tell them, you have to set aside more money and have in mind that money becomes to you. Why are we penalizing the seller? Says the Gemara, the famous saying, we had this in Gittin, and we'll have it in Lav, Achber Ganat Ela Chayra Ganat. When there's a mouse that steals things and hides it somewhere, stores it in a little hole somewhere, we say it's the mouse isn't the ganef because he had nowhere to put it. He wouldn't steal. It's the hole that's the ganef. So therefore, the reason why we penalize the seller is because the buyer, as bad as he wants or whatever, get rid of this money. The Mayasheni money, it wouldn't be a seller taking it greedily taking it. It never would have eventuated. So therefore, we penalize the seller. Says the Gemara, 1 second. If you can have a hole in the ground, but there's no mouse, the hole does nothing. It's inactive. So same thing here. The seller, if it wouldn't have been for the buyer offering to give the seller the money, the seller didn't do anything. So why are we penalizing the seller rather than the buyer? As the Gemara, it makes sense. Wherever the Isser is lying, that's where the penalty is. And because the money, which is Maisa Sheni, is sitting now with the seller, so therefore we penalize the seller. If he wouldn't have fled, we would have penalized the seller. The only reason why we learned that we tell the buyer, go set aside money and all that is because the seller disappeared. Next Mishnah. We're going to learn a number of cases here with these examples of an item which not only is forbidden to eat, you're not allowed to have any pleasure from it. And if you're not allowed to have any pleasure from it, if you gave it to a woman and say, you're engaged to me, you didn't give her anything because you can't have any pleasure. So says the Mishnah, if you gave a woman arla, the fruits of the first 3 years, but the din is not only you cannot eat it, you can't have any pleasure from it. Or beklaya kedem, you take the vineyard and you have grain with it. Rabbi Yoshi says you have to have 2 different kinds of grains and mix them with the grapes. Beklaya kedem, again, it's forbidden to have any pleasure. And the Gemara is going to bring each one to explain how do we know you don't have any pleasure from these things. So you should not engage. B'shar and Ishkal, an animal that gored somebody, and the law is that you have to stone the animal. And we're going to learn how we're going to find the Gemara. The din is that you not only can't you eat the animal, you cannot even have any pleasure. You gave it to her, nothing happened. Ube'egla rufa, that after you found a corpse and you don't know who it is, so you bring this egla, you bring it to Nachaleson, either a very tough ground or you bring it to a river, and you basically decapitated this egla rufa, and that egla rufa again is you don't have any pleasure. Tzipaide mitzayda, the process of a mitzayda becoming clean, so he has to bring 2 birds. One bird we get shecht, and then we dip the other bird, the live bird, into the blood of the one that was yishachten, and we sprinkle it on the mitzvah, and then we we shoo away that live bird, and but the bird that was yishachten is also bahana, can't have any benefit. You gave it to her, she's not good. Uvesar knows the hair of a nazir also is sacred, and you don't have any pleasure. Upetach hamar, firstborn of a donkey, cannot have pleasure. Ubasa b'chala, meat and milky, cannot have pleasure. The chulin shenishchut bazar. If you took an ordinary animal, you shechted it in the base of Mikdash, Eina Mekadeshes. She's not engaged. Says the Gemara. Machran, says the Mishnah. Machran, what happened? You sold, let's say, a cheeseburger. And now the money that you got in exchange by Avodah Zarah, the law is the money you got in exchange, the Isser of the Avodah Zarah transfers to the money as well. They're both now forbidden. But when it comes to all these other Isurei Hanah, the Isser does not transfer to the money, so the money is permitted. If you now took that money, you sold the cheeseburger, you took that money, you gave it to her, Mikudesh, she's engaged. Patient asks a question, anything which is forbidden to have pleasure, the law is if you're having pleasure with not the normal way, it's called Shalei Keder Chanos, and it's permitted. So why can't you just give it to the woman and she can enjoy those things, the basa b'chalav, and not eat it or use it in the normal way? So one answer is, some Rishonim say it's still asur midrabanan. It's still forbidden midrabanan. And then there's a whole issue whether if you gave a woman Kiddushin, which is forbidden midrabanan, but it's permitted from the Torah, does anything happen or not? And it's a discussion we had in Psachim as well about chitid, the kudenaisa, the wheat, the other answer is that if you don't use it the normal way, it no longer has the value of a pruta. Because such a limited use, it's not the normal way, it doesn't have much value, and that's the problem. Another question Rishonim have is, we'll learn the end of Tamura, and that is that what do you do with something which is forbidden to have hana? You bury it. But sometimes you actually burn it. And if the din is like chametz, you have to burn it. If the din is that you have to burn it, it turns into ashes. So the question is, if it turns into ashes now, it's no longer the original thing, and it's mutter bahana. So why, if you gave this woman one of these, let's say basa b'cholov, she'll then burn it, and the ashes maybe is worth a pruta, and she received something from you. So the Ritva and the other Rishonim say, because the fact is, you gave her nothing. They hold that something, let's say cheeseburger, when you don't have any pleasure from it, we once discussed it, it's a pshat, it's yours, you just can't enjoy it, or it's not even yours anymore, because what makes it yours when you can't do anything with it? So they hold that it's not yours. So when you gave her a cheeseburger, you gave her nothing. It wasn't yours. Afterwards she can turn it into ashes and enjoy it. Fine, but it didn't come from you. Okay, so now the Gemara. We'll go through each one of them. How do you know it's forbidden to have pleasure? And we'll bring different psukim. But Arlim and Olhaino, you know the pleasure. The time we learned, Areilim loyochel ainli eli isachilari. Hanom menayin haino, you can't have any pleasure from the first year crop. Menayin lehenem menavu haino, you don't have any pleasure. V'lo yisba, but you know use it as a dye. V'lo yadlik, but you don't use it to light a candle. Tamalema v'arautem es arlosai. The rabbis, it says arautem arlosai. Why the double talk or double speak? Arautem arlosai, to tell you cannot eat, nor can you have pleasure. The rabbis as kulam, to include all of these examples. Next one is klaya kerem. How do you know that you not have pleasure? Pen tigdish. It might become holy, and when you talk about klaya kerem, it might ruin it to become holy. And we break it up in two words: pen tukad eish. And we say that as if that it's like the fire that has to be burnt. In other words, you can't have any pleasure from it whatsoever. Ravashi says pen yia kodesh. That means it's like kodesh. It's like a korban. And that's why we know that you're not allowed to have any benefit from klaya kerem. Ask the Gemara, ima kodesh, comparing it to kodesh, then toif is a dam. But we know that by kodesh, if you, let's say, if you something which is holy, and you try to swap for money, the money becomes holy, and the animal remains holy. So the why then can you give it to a woman? He says if you sold it for money, you can give the money to the woman, but the money itself is holy. If it's kodesh to the dam of the yaitzel chulun, sorry. By kodesh we say that, let's say you can redeem kodesh. So what happens? The money becomes holy, and the original animal, is no longer holy. So if we learn klaya kerem from kodesh, then the law should be that klaya kerem, as soon as you swap it for money, it's no longer forbidden. Even though that grapes and wheat growing together is no longer forbidden. No such thing. If you can learn from your way. Ima kodesh toiv the dam of the chulun, av klaya kerem to the dam of the chulun. So saying that klaya kerem, that the money should be transferred and go to chulun. We go back to what Chizkiah originally said, and that's pen. Tigdish is pen tukad eish. You have to burn it, and you have any pleasure. Okay, now we talk about shara niskul menayin. How do you know you cannot have a pleasure? Shara niskul is 2 stages. So we go ahead and the Bezdin rule that this animal has to be put down, has to be stoned. Now, there's the period till it gets stoned, and then there's the period post the stoning. Now, once it's stoned, obviously you cannot eat it because you didn't shecht it. But what about the period before the stone? There's a famous Rabbeinu Tam in Baba Kama and other places where he learns that you're not allowed to eat the shara niskul before you stone it, but you could have pleasure. When does the Isser of pleasure kick in? Only after you shecht it. And for him, this Gemara here is a little bit difficult to work out. But let's see how this Gemara works. Shara niskul, how do you know? Time we learn the mashma shenem. It says in the pasuk, "Sokol yisokol hashar." You should stone the animal. Ainli yodeya. So doesn't that automatically notion of Eli that it's just a carcass? You're not allowed to eat it because you didn't shecht it. The nevela surabachila. You're not allowed to eat nevela. So you would think the Torah doesn't have to spell out, "Don't eat the shara niskul." He's matam lechol psari. So why in the world does the Torah say, "Don't eat its flesh"? Of course you can't eat its flesh. You stoned it; it's dead. Magilach, it comes to tell you, must be talking about that you would have thought you could eat it. You shechted it. In other words, let's say you went out of Bezdin, but instead of stoning it, you shechted it. You would have thought, oh, okay, I shechted it, maybe I can eat it. To tell you that if you shechted it, once the Bezdin rules that it has to be put to death, you cannot eat from it. That's the Chiddush. Says the Gemara, okay, but how do you know you cannot have any pleasure from it as well? We say, it says in the pasuk, Baal Hashar Naki, the owner of the shar has been cleansed from his assets. In other words, he has no. We say Naki means completely, separated from his assets because he don't have any pleasure in whatsoever. Says the Gemara, my mashma. How do you see from the word Baal Hashar Naki that the owner cannot have any pleasure from it? Says the Gemara, Shibazayim says. To others, a person's friend, Yotza plenty knocking the chasar, that person was cleaned out. You went to the cleaners, in other words, He has nothing left. Can't have any benefit. Says the Gemara, how do you know? Now, this is an interesting question. That the Gemara is going to ask a question. We had in Psachim the Chabei, we had Machlekes Chizkei Ravu. When the Torah says don't eat, is it limited only to a prohibition of eating, or don't eat means don't also have pleasure from it, which is like tantamount to eating. So Rabbi Abu says when it says lo ya'achol, it means also you cannot have any pleasure. So ask the Gemara as follows: how do you know the high lo ya'achol psari? that you said, what am I using the pasuk don't eat when l'chayda, if it's stoned? Of course you cannot eat. So you said it's talking about eating, but it's limited. It's telling me that if I shechted it, I cannot eat it either. You told me it's talking about if I went out of the court and I decided to shecht. I'm asking, how do you know that? Dilma, maybe you could eat after, if you shechted it before you stoned it, maybe you could eat it. So what does it mean the Torah don't eat the psari? Maybe the Torah is trying to teach you don't have pleasure. If you did skila, of course you cannot eat it. But lo ya'achal means, but I don't want you to have any pleasure either. Forget the balashar noki. Let's just learn from lo ya'achal. How do you know lo ya'achal means limited only to eating and it's talking about after shchita? Well, lo ya'achal heichad asakli miskul dasa. Lo ya'achal is coming to maybe tell you if you stoned it, not only don't you eat it, don't have any pleasure. Ukarabavu like Abavu. What Abavu say? Omar Abavu said. Whenever it says lo ya'achol l'seichel echad isa achila the echad isa hana, everything's forbidden. Achi parachla kaso. Unless the Torah tells you otherwise. And how do I know that? We find that the Torah clearly spelled out what should you do with an avela. It's in the pasuk like geir asher b'sharecha to the convert that's living in your area. You should give it to titnena. And so on. So we learned the Torah, they clearly said you can give it to them. What you can have a no. So because the Torah says over there you can eat, the Torah has to go out of its way to tell you can give it to them. Must be that if had it not said that, you would have thought not only can't I eat it, I can't even have pleasure from it. So that's how I know every time Lo Ya'achol it means pleasure. So now they're going to ask. So maybe that's what it means over here. Lo Ya'achol does not mean don't eat after shchita. Maybe it means don't have pleasure after stoning. Says the Gemara, no. Hani mili, when do we say that it means don't have pleasure? If lo yachol, if let's say it says something lo yachol, don't eat, then we say it's not limited only to a prohibition of eating, it's also telling you do not have any pleasure. But over here, lo yachol is redundant. I know you cannot eat it because you stoned it. So if the Torah wanted to tell you, I don't want you to have pleasure, then the Torah should have just spoken about pleasure. The Torah just said, lo yehenet, don't have pleasure. Because we don't need to tell me don't eat, because I know anyway you can't eat stoned. That's how I know that lo ya'achal means eating, and it's talking about you shechted it, you didn't stone it, instead you defy the words of the rabbis and you shechted it and tell you can't eat from it. So the Gemara, that's what I'm saying here. So the Gemara, hani mili, when do we say lo ya'achal includes eating and pleasure? When you learn also the prohibition of eating from Le'ach, over here, Isar Achile Misakol Yisakol Nafka, the prohibition of eating we learn out from somewhere else, from Sakol Yisakol. And therefore, because the prohibition of eating is from Sakol Yisakol, if the Torah wanted to tell you don't have pleasure, these are not if for pleasure, then Nitlakro Lo Yehenna should have said Lo Yehenna, don't have pleasure. Or Inami Lo Ya'achol, even if I'll grant you that Lo Ya'achol here means only pleasure. It's talking about stoning and don't have any pleasure. Es psari, why have to add the words es psari is flesh? It must be the Torah is going to tell you that afagav the shachte ke'ein basar, that even though you shechted it like any other animal, and you didn't stone it, you just shechted it, I want you to know also you cannot eat it. Okay. Is maskiv mazuta. So mazuta asked the question, the aim, maybe I'll say like this. When do we say you're not allowed to eat it if you shechted it, if you didn't use the right equipment? Instead of using a knife, a chalaf, you decide to use a stone, a very sharp pointed stone. So therefore over there we say, you know what? Even though you didn't stone it, you just shechted it, I don't want you to eat it. Other times it's acceptable, I don't want you to eat it. But if you use a knife, maybe you could. Use the stone. And you shechted it, the merzik is killer because it looks like stoning. So therefore, we say, you know what? You cannot eat it anymore. Use a stone. What stoning? Also use stones. Ava shachtas, we use a metal knife. Then loy, maybe you are allowed to eat it. Says he, what are you talking about? Midei sakin barais. Where does the Torah say you have to use a knife to shech an animal? It says you have to use a sharp object to shech. Well, So therefore, a stone is just as good as a knife. And if a stone you're not allowed to eat, then a knife also you cannot eat. Boy, furthermore, Tanya learned the Braisa about kol shoftim. You can use any implement you want, bein b'tzar, whether it's a rock, bein b'tzar, use a glass, bein b'kremer shulchan, or the leaf of a reed if it's very sharp. Says the Gemara. Okay, so now we know that lo ya'achol is talking about shchita, and now and once we know that lo ya'achol you cannot shech, it also means you cannot have any pleasure. So now we're saying clearly you cannot have any pleasure even while the animal is alive, or right after the Bezin Paskin, you cannot eat it, nor can you have any pleasure. So why did we use before Baal Asher Naki? What are we going to be said before Baal Asher Naki comes to teach you? He's been cleaned out, no assets left, you can't have any pleasure. But now you tell me you learn from Lo Yachol. So what do I do with Baal Asher Naki? So now that you tell me you learn both have Lo Yachol. Hi Baal Asher Naki. So what are you willing to do with Baal Asher? Says Gemara, that not only can't you have any pleasure from the meat, nor can you have any pleasure from the hide. Because I would have thought, I would have thought it says lo ya'ach as psari, you shouldn't eat his flesh. Okay, besari also only the flesh is forbidden. The hide is permitted, and that's why he says Baal Hashar Naki lost all of his assets, including the hide. Says the Gemara lahanach tanoi. And these tonight, the mafle high balasher naki lechatzi kreifud mevelodas. This tonight, we know that an animal, the first 3 times it gores, we're going to learn in the Baba Kama, the next Masechta, the first 3 times it gores, you only pay chatzi nezik. You only pay half the nezik. If the animal kills a person, not a mu'ud, but the first 3 times, when you kill a person after 3 times, you pay kaifer, you pay a certain compensation to the family. What about the first 3 times when you pay half a damage? You also pay half of a kaifer. Says the Gemara, we use the balashoy naki lechatzi kaifer to tell you that if you kill the animal kills a person, you don't have to pay half of the kaifer, and we don't say that a tam has to pay half of the compensation. And also mevelodas, if the animal gored a woman and as a result of that she miscarried, you don't have to pay for that at all. So how do they know? So they use Balasher Noki for something else. They use Lo Yachol, tell you not allowed to eat, nor can you have pleasure from Psari, only the flesh. How do they know you cannot have any pleasure from the hide? How do they know? Says the Gemara, you know how they know? For the word S, Psari. S is and. What do you mean and? And means the basar and something else which is sort of secondary to the flesh. And that is the hide. So it says lo ya'achal es psari. Don't say lo ya'achal psari. Don't eat the flesh. Es psari. That comes along with the flesh. That's the hide. And idach. That's such a good drasha. Why do you then need balash or noki or anything like that? The Gemara said, idach es loy darish. They don't believe that the word and is actually coming to add anything. And we have an interesting argument as to whether it does or not. The time we learned Shimon Am Sunni. That Shimon Am Sunni. I'm going to say Nechemia Am Sunni. Every time the Torah says the word and, they darshan, it comes to add something. And something which is sort of secondary, but add something. When it came to the following pasuk, he was stopped. Le'es Hashem elekecha tira, and Hashem you should fear. And means Hashem, but also something else. What else can you put in the same realm as Hashem? Pedish, he said, guys, I think I made a mistake. Es does not come to add anything, and all the drashas I made till now was wrong. What do you do with all the drashas he gave us with S? He said to them, every time I gave you a drasha about S, I got reward because we're learning Torah. Now I'm walking away from all my drashas, and I'm going to get a reward for that. He believed that S you cannot darshan. Kiva came along, believe it, and he said, yes, S we darshan, and I'll tell you what we learn out from S. The rabbis to include Talmidei Chachamim. To include Talmidei Chachamim, the Talmidei Chachamim you have to fear as well. And then the secondary you have to fear. Why you fear Talmidei Chachamim? Because of Torah, which is Hashem's Torah. So he found a drasha for S, so therefore he reinstated all the drashas that Shimon Am Sunni put in for the S. So Machlekes Kiva said you do darshan S, and Shimon Am Sunni said you don't darshan S. That's the Machlekes, whether you use S psarei or you use Baal Hashar Naki to teach you that you can't have any pleasure from the hide. Okay, we'll stop.